So, one of the things that I have been asked recently was to give advice about being a comic book writer. It did not seem to me at first that I could say much about this, but then it occurred to me that there aren't many people in India who call themselves comic book writers. And since I am someone who calls himself a comic book writer, I figured I can tell you some basic stuff. Very basic things that one does not think often about before thinking of or considering comic book writing as a profession or even a side job. So, this video is about becoming a comic book writer. The first thing you need to realize is that comic books are not really a large industry, which means that the amount of money you can make writing comic books exclusively is limited. Also, even if you have a contract with a comic book publisher, the amount of writing you will do will earn you money on a script by script basis, which means that you will get paid for every script you write. It's not going to be a monthly payment kind of thing. It's not going to be a salary. So if you have a day job and you're considering leaving it and becoming a full-time comic book writer, don't do it. Don't. Do not do it. It's a bad idea if and especially if you have a family to support, and in these times when money is hard to come by, don't do it. Write comics as maybe something you love to do, but if you do comics under the impression that it is going to make you a living, now is not a good time. It hasn't been a good time for quite some time, but maybe right now is the worst possible time to do an experiment like that with your career. So don't. The most important quality you need to have in order to be a comic book writer is a visual imagination. Comic book writing is very different from writing a story or a poem because you have the luxury of going inside a character's head. However, in comics, even though there are things like thought bubbles, which look like this, the use of them is kind of frowned upon these days. So try to make your story as much based on dialogue as possible, as much action oriented as possible. By which I don't need action as in fighting scenes or laser beams or spaceships shooting at each other, but things need to happen. People need to move. If your comic book just has people talking to each other using speech bubble, speech bubble, speech bubble, speech bubble, it's going to be a boring comic book. So visual imaginations as well as action oriented imaginations are better than the kind of imagination you perhaps require to write something that is very thought intensive. There are ways to do stories which are thought intensive in action oriented ways. Even if you're imagining something, even if your character is imagining something, don't make it a narration. Turn it into something that is happening, something that has movement associated with it. The next thing you need to remember is that your script is not a work of literature. Your script is a manual. Your script is not going to be read by anyone except you and the artist who's drawing your comic book. Your script is basically what you're doing when you're writing a script is that you're writing a manual for the artist. Some scripts, when you read them, do look like works of art, but that is not the primary purpose. The primary purpose of your script is to explain to the artist what he must draw. Your script should have, instructions in brackets. This guy needs to look angry, or there has to be something in the background that justifies a certain point that a character is making about the world that they live in. You also need to keep in mind that you're not writing for video. In video, you have the liberty of disregarding the background. I mean, directors do pay a lot of attention to what is happening in the background, how they create their frame, but even they don't have to create every single thing in the background. For example, if they're shooting a scene in a field, they don't have to create the trees in the background, but your artist does. And therefore, you should keep in mind what all information you convey to the artist and what all you need them to know about the scene before they start drawing. For example, I have seen scripts where writers have expressly written in the captions saying, there is a jar on the shelf in the background, do not ignore it. It is there for a reason. This jar may not be something that your characters talk about, and the importance of it may become apparent at a later point in time in the story. But the jar needs to be there. So if you have elements in your scene that the artist, should know about, even though the reader would not, make it clear in the script. It also helps if you understand how your workflow, how your industry's workflow works. A comic book is never the work of just a writer. In fact, a comic book is not even a writer's medium. It is the artist's medium. You have to recognize the fact and appreciate the fact, if you can, that you are secondary as a writer. The primary thing people pick up a comic book for is the art. Sure, story plays a very important role, and the art will be nothing if there is no good story behind it. But you have to accept to a certain extent that once the artist draws what he has to draw, that becomes the comics central focus point. And the artist is not alone. The art department of a comic books production can be divided up into three parts: the penciler, the person who draws the line art; the inker, the person who darkens those lines and gives them shadows; and finally the colorist, the person who colors the comic books, gives color to the art. And then at last there is the letterer, who puts in the speech bubbles and the dialogues and the sound effects, like, crash, boom, smash, that sort of thing. I have written comics, and I have also experimented with lettering. Although there are people who specialize in lettering, who are experts in how to letter comic books, how to use words on art. Uh, that's a different discipline in and of itself. So is coloring. There are people who are experts at coloring and don't do anything other than that. They don't draw, they just color, either digitally or manually. Although these days most comics are drawn and colored digitally. Comic book writing is something that you can do from home, which means that in this age of work from home, it is a very good profession if you don't need it for money. As I said before, don't expect money out of comic book writing as a career, but if you want to write comics, you can actually do it from home. All the publishers in India, oh, by the way, there are a good number of high quality comic book publishers in India. I will do a separate video on them if you want, but all of them don't have an office. None of them have an office. You can write your scripts, pitch it to them. If they like it, there is a deal, you get your money, they move on, they get it made, and then you can maybe have some amount of editorial control or some amount of copyright. But yeah, no office. Comic book writing, as far as I have seen, people don't have a studio in India. People work from home, they write wherever they are, they send it to the studio, which then deals with all the other mundane aspects: printing, publishing, etc. You may not be able to find openings for the job of comic book writer on any online bulletin board or on Facebook groups, etc. There will be calls, but for the most part, the only way you can become a comic book writer in India is if you know the people who are in the comic book industry. Because as I said, it's not a very large industry. The number of people who are actively producing comics is small. You can count them on the fingers of both of your hands, all the major players. And it helps if you know them somehow. If you can establish contact using social media, that's a very good tool. I myself met comic book publishers and made friends in the community by attending comic cons and knowing people. And online, back in the day when I started, we had mailing lists, like Yahoo mailing lists. That's how I met a lot of my comic book industry contacts. And yeah, so if you're going to write comic books, hang out in Facebook groups where comic book publishers hang out and build relationships with them. Like, become friends, talk about comics, ask them if they're looking for a partner. Don't write to a comic book publisher saying that you're a writer and that you're looking for work. Comic book publishers don't have projects waiting for you. Come up with an idea, pitch it. And if the comic book publisher likes it, maybe you will have your chance. Of course, some comic book publishers, like my publisher, Holy Cow Entertainment, does not accept pitches from outside. You can introduce yourself, and then maybe if your work is appreciated by them, they'll give you a chance to work on one of their own properties. They own the copyright to their properties, and you can write scripts featuring the characters that Holy Cow already owns. So that's how it works with some publishers. And lastly, one bit of advice that I think I should add: when you're starting off writing comic books, don't write a magnum opus. Don't write a story that will last for 3,000 issues and then people will find out what happens. Because the publisher, honestly, being a small publisher, a small player, cannot take that kind of a risk. They have to know that you are a good writer before they can give you a chance writing a longer story. So if you're going to pitch something to a publisher, start with something small. Start with something, a single story featuring one of their characters, and ask them if they like it. If they like it, maybe you will get your chance at developing that particular small story into something big. And if that works, maybe then they will have enough faith in you to give you a bigger project. Don't pitch gigantic projects hoping for publishers to take a gamble on you, because they honestly can't. There just isn't that much money in the Indian comic book industry. And that was the basics of writing a comic book in India, or the basics of becoming a comic book writer in India. If you like this video, share it with a friend of yours who's thinking on these lines, who's trying to become a comic book writer. Or if you have more questions about any of the things that I mentioned today, please feel free to ask them in the comments.